Right, welcome everyone. I think can you hear me? Is that all right? Good. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us in this third Meet the Candidates webinar. And before we start, just let me say that this webinar, like the previous two, will be recorded and made available on the MNC website for viewing later. So if you have people you know who weren't able to make it today, please let them know when that recording goes up so they can watch it. All right, Stan, would you like to open us in prayer?
Certainly, I'd be glad to. So let us all go into God in prayer. Our loving God, we thank you for the exciting time that's coming ahead for MCC, and we remain joyful and hopeful on how you're going to work through our denomination and impact the world for you. And I pray that we all can have open hearts and open minds and open spirits as we hear the candidates today and as we think and pray over the next 3 months before we get to General Conference in terms of who you have ordained to lead us for the next several years. Be with us during this time. Give each of us this clarity and excitement of how you're going to speak to us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Stan. So let's get started. We'll be running this webinar in two sections. The first will give a short update about the work that we've done on the MNC since we last spoke to you. And then the important bit is getting to meet our candidates. So let's get underway. If you're new to this, we have an introductory video and our bios on the MNC webpage. So please go there and have a look if you'd like to know more about the MNC. Slide. So just to recap, the role of the MNC is to be appointed by the governing board, and there'll be 5 of us. And our responsibility is to actively solicit candidates for the position of moderator, review any and all applications, and select up to 5 qualified candidates. The qualified candidates shall be presented by the governing board to the General Conference for election. So in review, so that's what we've been doing, and we're very happy to be at this stage where we can actually introduce you to the candidates. So our schedule so far, we are nearly at the end of this process, which we're all very, very excited about. So we're at the nomination process, and the next will be election in conference in July, and then rejoicing, which will be just fantastic. So a quick update on our nominations and applications. And I've gone over, haven't I? Whose toes have I trodden? Who's presenting these?
I think this is where I'm supposed to take over for a little bit. So, okay, we closed the nominations on the 30th of January. There were 18 actual nominations for 12 different individuals. And of those 12 individuals, 10 did complete their applications. And those are the 10 that we evaluated and discussed. And so we then met face-to-face in Austin for 4 days, January 31st to February 3rd. And I believe that I was going to, at this point, turn it over to Velma, who was going to talk more about what actually occurred at the meeting. Velma?
I'm here. I was having trouble. This was unexpected. No, we did pray together. We discussed together. We discerned together. We did extensive work around team building and unconscious bias training. We used a couple of counselors from our home church that we've used before for our deacons training, which were very good. We reviewed the applications submitted for the moderator role. We formulated the candidate interview questions, and we finalized the rubric weighting system that the MNC used as a tool in helping us reach our final decision. We circled each day We circled each day with an overview of the previous day, and we started each day with devotion and communion and ended each day in prayer and sharing our evening meals together. And this meeting was entirely funded by the members of the MNC, as we firmly believe that this is vital work for the future of MCC, and that this meeting in person was the best way for us to faithfully serve MCC, our MNC charter, and the quality, integrity, and success of the MNC process. The MNC wishes to thank the staff of Sanctuary in the Woods, retired Reverend Elder Ken Martin, his spouse Tom Cole, Reverend Joe Bell, her spouse Cheryl Meyer, and my spouse Darlene Hernandez. They took very good care of us while we worked. At the conclusion of the meeting, 5 candidates were shortlisted to continue to the interview stage of the process. These 5 candidates were interviewed using the Zoom video conference technology. These interviews were conducted over a period of 4 days in the second week of February. We had a maximum time of 90 minutes assigned to each interview. A list of 23 questions developed by the MNC at the face-to-face meeting were used. All candidates were asked questions 1 through 22, and we had an extra question for our lay candidate. And these questions are now available on the FAQ page of the MNC website. And just to give you a sample of the questions, like we'll look at number 4, what do you see as the top 3 challenges facing MCC? Like number 9, how can MCC begin to address the reality of being a U.S.-centric church while proclaiming to be a global denomination? Question 14, as moderator, how would you lead the denomination in providing additional resources to the local churches? Question 21, we have talked a lot about beginning and vision. However, some of the most destructive times in the church have involved unhealthy leaving. So what does it mean to you to healthily transition out of a role? And how important is healthy exiting to you? And question 23 for our lay candidate. Even though for decades the bylaws have made it possible for a lay person to hold the position of moderator, this has never been seen in practice. How would you help people to understand the role of a lay moderator, and what would you see as possible opportunities for growth and transformation as potentially the first lay moderator of a global movement? I do want to reiterate these questions are available under the FAQs tab of the MNC webpage. After the interviews, the MNC unanimously decided to proceed with reference checks for 3 of the candidates. Each candidate supplied 4 references, each of whom were called by a member of the MNC. For consistency, each reference was asked the same list of questions that had been developed by the MNC at the face-to-face meeting. These questions were then weighted using a rubric tool. After the interviews and the reference checks, the MNC took time to think, pray, discern, and ponder. The final slate was then decided upon, with each member of the MNC deciding upon the 3 candidates chosen without prior discussion with each other. This gives us confidence that we have chosen the 3 most qualified candidates from the 10 people that applied. We would like to thank everyone who took the time to discern and nominate and apply. The quality of the applications was very high, and our job was not easy. Only one person can be elected as moderator, and we do believe that each of the candidates on the final slate would be an excellent moderator for MCC at such a time as this. We would be confident for any of the candidates on the final slate to be voted in by the General Conference. The MNC has received feedback and questions regarding the slate. We are grateful for the feedback, and we thank you for your voices and encourage you to remain in contact with us. We acknowledge and uphold the importance of these questions, and we have the following statement to make about the final slate of candidates. The slate of candidates chosen and put forward by the MNC contains the most qualified candidates from those who applied. The decision of the MNC regarding the slate was unanimous. The work of the MNC is confidential, and no information will be released now or at any time in the future regarding the MNC discussions, decisions, or deliberations. We are also working on a final report to the fellowship to be included in the General Conference 2019 document packet and published on the MNC website. We encourage all of you, all of MCC, to patiently await this report. We hope to have the final report finished by April 15th. Brendan?
Thanks, Velma. Just to go over briefly again the timeline and to let everyone know where we are right now. If you look at the graphic there, it will show you that we're currently next to the last, where it says providing opportunities for candidate communications, which we're starting tonight. That will run from April 1st, a couple of days ago, through late June. And so we're going to give you an opportunity now to hear the voices of our candidates. But we also want to let you know, let me get this done, the next part of the process is for our candidates to be put forth at the 2019 General Conference in Orlando. The governing board is responsible for running of the election process, and we would ask that any questions regarding the election process be directed to the governing board. Now, with that said, let's take a few minutes to hear the voices of our candidates. We'll begin in alphabetical order, so we'll start with Elizabeth Bezori. So Liz, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Brendan. I want to say bonjour, bonsoir, buenas noches, guten Abend, hola, konnichiwa, habari, and hi to all of you, because we are a global movement. I want to personally thank each of you for taking time from your schedule to attend this webinar and kind of get to know the candidates a little bit better. It really does demonstrate your commitment to MCC and to our future. You know, if you'd asked me a couple of months ago if I thought I'd be sitting on this side of the Adobe Connect meeting, I would have said no way, like a big no way. But clearly, God had another idea, and I'm learning to lean in to this blessing, so thank you. I want to answer a question right up front, and you saw it was kind of part of question 23, that special question for me when I was interviewed. And that's the question of a layperson as moderator, because I've heard that from several people. And I just want to say, we're MCC. If not us, who or whom? You know, and we talk about a basic tenet of our beliefs is the priesthood of all believers. And I would remind you that not only do we currently have a lay elder, but we've now had 4 in our history. And then lastly, I would remind you about the greatest lay person of all, Jesus. You know, I think we forget how much MCC is needed and that we're probably needed right now more than ever before. Given our current geopolitical climate and landscape and the dismissal of people and basic human rights around our world, we are needed more than ever to proclaim the message of God's all-inclusive love. That there are many people out there that are yearning. You know, we talk about people who are spiritual, and they want a spiritual connection that has practical and tangible ways to live out their faith. This is where we, MCC, excel, in this area of justice and human rights. But let's be honest. Within MCC, we still have work to do. So I'll lay out some priorities, I believe, that need to be on the top of the list for the next moderator. First priority, the absolute first one, is for the moderator, along with all MCCers, to work on restoring trust. We can't move forward transforming the world if we don't transform ourselves. There's no magic pill, let's be honest, to restore trust. This is going to take work. It's going to take vulnerability. It's going to take honesty on all of our parts. This is necessary work that we have to do. And the moderator has to set the example and the tone. And together, we need to build a culture where we don't think the worst about people, we think the best about them. You know, we need to have discussions where we listen and hear with open hearts. And we have to invite those people who make us uncomfortable to the table with us. Because what binds us is much greater than what separates us. And if the Spirit moves through the General Conference and I am elected as the moderator, I want to tell you that one of the first things I will do while we're at General Conference is I guarantee you I will spend time, whether it's in conference rooms, at the pool, at a coffee shop, the local Starbucks, whether it's at the bar, because I'm hearing what you have to say, because we all have a voice that needs to be heard. I will also institute what I'm terming right now advisory boards. They will be focused on helping us work towards eradicating the items that separate us. And most specifically, I'm talking about racism, ageism, and post-colonialism. We're a global movement. Let's dust off that International Task Force report. I did that the other day, and I think there's some really good starting points that we could go out and start to look at and execute on now. So first is the priority, though, to rebuild trust. The second one is that we really do need to live into and understand that we live in a global world. MCC may look different in different parts of the world, and that's great, my friends. That's a good thing. We are working for a global corporation. We have learned that we have to work and lean into each other's strengths. I learned that in my experiences working for this global corporation, and we need to be intentional. We need to be intentional in this area and understand that one size MCC does not fit all. It may be one of our largest gifts. We are the Human Rights Church. We are a movement for justice. And how we do that is going to look different in different parts of the world. It's going to look different in Brazil than it looks in the Philippines. It's going to look different in Germany maybe than it looks in California or in Mexico versus Canada. And that is part of our richness. So first thing for the moderator is to work what we need to do around restoring trust. The second is learning to live into the fact that we are a global corporation. Third, the moderator needs to focus on our financial realities and the realities of a shrinking economy. And I think we, the denomination, need to be small and not top-heavy. We need to be nimble and focused on being the resource hub for the local churches to provide care and connection between and among the churches. We need to share our best practices. This is not going to be a tops-down environment. And finally, the moderator needs to have an essential goal and objective of developing the next set of leaders. Each of us, as a leader, whether in our local church or at a denominational level, must raise up our next leaders. And I'm proposing that we have an intentional leadership program, a leadership program focused on young adults and focused on new clergy. You know, I was thinking about it, trying to vision this, and I was imagining being a newly out of seminary and thrown into my first pastorate. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it really be great if I had a more experienced pastor in my corner in an intentional way as my mentor? Or maybe I could have working with me a lay person who can help me understand some things they didn't teach me in seminary, like how to read a balance sheet or a profit and loss statement. My vision for MCC is that we actually live into our prophetic call, the one that's found in our vision statement that says, following the example of Jesus and empowered by the Spirit, we seek to build leading edge church communities that demand, proclaim, and do justice in the world. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your commitment to MCC, and may God bless you now and always. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. And now we'll hear from Reverend Elder Cecilia Eggleston. Cecilia?
Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are. Oh, excuse me a moment. There you go. It's really great to be with you all on this webinar, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us in this discussion. I hope that you had an opportunity to see all the introductory videos for all the candidates. In my introductory video, I talked about unity, stability, and growth. These are important building blocks for us to help us to answer the call that I know that God has for us. A question that I think we all need to be thinking and praying about is, what is it that we have in common that could make the world a better place for more people? What is it that we have in common that could make the world a better place for more people? We're located in so many different parts of the world, serving in a variety of different cultures and settings. We have diverse and strongly held views about what it means to be MCC, and perhaps also what it means to be going together as we go forward. These are not problems to be fixed. This is our reality as a global church. This new chapter in our journey is a great time to listen together to what God is calling us to do and to be. Because God is calling us to change more lives. My life has been changed by being part of MCC, and I'm sure that yours has too. I believe that we are called to make a difference, to change the world. We can listen and learn together about what our unique calling is and how we can answer it in these rapidly changing and uncertain times. Another important question is, what do we have and what are we going to do with our resources? I currently work for an international development charity, working with farmers in some of the poorest circumstances in East Africa. These are mainly women, disabled people, orphans, and those affected by HIV and AIDS. When our African staff start working with a new group of farmers, they don't ask, what do you need? They ask, what have you got? We help the farmers to see what they already have with fresh eyes. Land, even the smallest amount. Access to water. Family and neighbours who can help them. And their own willingness to work hard and to try something new. We then train and equip them to use these assets to transform their own lives and to have a vibrant and sustainable future. So what have we got in MCC? In our local congregations, we already have a wealth of life experience. People who donate generously of their time, their talents, and their finances. We have servant leaders who work way over their paid hours, if they are paid, and serve their wider community as well as their congregation. We have talented, committed, and passionate denominational staff, as well as all of those who serve the denomination as volunteers in the LEAD program, on the governing board, and a variety of different teams on the Council of Elders, etc. So how do we use what we already have in new and existing ways to answer God's call? This is an exciting question, and listening to the Holy Spirit to explore this together, I think is going to be a great part of our journey. And I believe as we do explore this question, new opportunities and the resources we need to respond to them will unfold before us. In order for us to have these open, honest and respectful dialogues about this and other topics, it's important to start building trust and to also assume good intent. Communication back and forth has to be clear and timely so that we all feel as though we know what's going on and what the next steps might be. If we want a culture that is healthy, safe, and values each and every one of us, we all have to play a part in creating it and holding ourselves and each other accountable for maintaining it. And that includes me too. I'm delighted and honoured to be a moderated candidate. I'm excited about our future, whatever my part within it will be. And I'm looking forward to hearing what each of you wish to share on this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. And now we'll hear from Reverend Elder Tony Freeman. Tony, I'll turn it over to you. Tony, you're muted, so I need you to unmute yourself. I see your lips moving.
About now.
There we go. Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. Wrong button. Well, good evening, and it's wonderful to be able to be present with you tonight. And I want to thank all of you for your active participation in this really critical season of spiritual discernment in metropolitan community churches. And I also want to thank you for taking the time, as I know we're coming up on Holy Week, and everyone is very, very busy getting ready for that. So I hope maybe this is just a little break for you from that. But let's all continue to pray for our pastors and lay leaders as we get ready for this important time in the life of our churches. I wanted to start and also talk a little bit about trust. And I'm going to look at it from a couple different angles. And I want to begin by sharing with you a sentence that I wrote for the Moderators Nominating Committee about this, and it said, "There's an urgent emphasis in the materials about the need for healing and to rebuild trust in MCC. This is coupled with an emphasis on the urgent need for missional clarity that is shared and embodied and a prophetic and inspiring vision." And then I went on to say, "Trust is central both to our present need for healing and for us to go boldly into uncharted territory that is the terrain of a new vision." So what I see with trust is that it's twofold. It's going to be, there's some short-term things that we need to do internally, and then there is some longer-term things that's going to take more time. Initially, around trust and building trust, there is a little bit of a difference in that rebuilding trust actually calls for us to find forgiveness. And I believe that having that grace and forgiveness is going to be an essential piece for us to be able to move forward and to have the energy and the focus to be able to embrace and move forward into a new vision for to be a 21st century movement. Now, in the terms of the building trust, it starts with caring, that people honestly know that you care about each other. And then there's authenticity that has to be there for trust. And authenticity to me in this means is, you tell people what you're going to do and then you do it. You don't surprise them with what you're going to do, but you follow through and you finish it. And that kind of thing certainly helps build trust. Physical transparency is absolutely essential for trust, as is institutional accountability. We all have to be accountable for the work that we're called to do, and that goes at every level. Then, of course, we need to have the two-way communication. communication can't just be one way from the top down or the other way. It has to go both ways, and we need to have more mechanisms to be able to do that. One of the other things that causes some of the biggest challenges in any organization is around not having clear decision-making processes that everyone understands. So being clear about how decisions are made in MCC would be absolutely critical, I believe, as part of not only building trust, but maintaining trust. And at the same time, I think we have to be aware that we have a significant portion of people who, even though they have felt some of the sting of what's had transpired in the past, are just more hungry to move on. They want to move forward. They want to begin to embrace this new future with MCC. And so I think we have to be mindful of both. Let's do the intentional work that we need to do around the healing, and at the same time, let's not lose sight of what we need to do to begin to move forward and into a bold new future. One of the ways that trust is an important factor is around missional clarity. It's especially important for donors. Donors want to know that you're clear about your mission and that your resources are allocated towards that mission. And who are MCC's primary donors? The local church. The local church. And so having missional clarity also builds trust in terms of the bigger picture. And so I would suggest that in the first 90 days that we spend time, intentional time on healing. We have time for prayer, for looking at the sacred text around forgiveness and around grace, and at the same time that we begin to look in that 90 days around a charter to begin to look at our future. What is our purpose? What is our identity? And that help us to get clear around those things. And I believe that that will also add to will be a significant factor in helping us to build trust. Trust is key for us in the present and for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Cecilia, and thank you, Liz. We're now going to move into a time of question and answers. This will be moderated by yours truly, and all questions and responses will be added to the FAQ page on the MNC website within a week to 10 days. Please also keep in mind these webinars will also be recorded and made available on the MNC website. We would also like to ask that if you have any questions after this webinar, that you send them directly to the MNC. The candidates and the governing board have been asked to forward any questions they receive regarding the MNC process or the slate of candidates to the MNC for reply. This is so we can be fair and equitable to each candidate. So I will do my best, and we will do our best to get through as many questions as we can. So we'll start here. David Wilson, Eastern USA Network. In Chicago, the Reverend Dr. James Ford reminded us that finally, the question has been asked to which MCC are the answer. What is that question for which we are to answer? In Chicago, the Reverend Dr. James Ford reminded us that finally the question has been asked to which you, MCC, are the answer. What was or is that question for which we are the answer? I'll start with Liz.
Thank you, David, for the question. We are the answer for a lot of things. But most importantly, I believe we're the answer for people who don't have a voice. That part of our prophetic call is to be the place, I was listening to Tony, he was using some of the language that I like to use around vulnerability and authenticity and accountability, where people can come as they are You know, people talk about other churches being inclusive or affirming, and it's like that was someplace they needed to get to, and I always, it feels to me, from my perspective, like an afterthought. The question in what we are is we aren't an afterthought. Everyone can come as they are, and we have that ability and that desire and the call to stand with and for those who have no voice, and to give them that voice. So that's I think, I think I could probably go on much longer, but in the interest of time, I'll stop with that, and I'd be happy to discuss that further if anyone wants to in my town hall, because I think it's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Cecilia?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think it's to do with our spirit. There is something about us being willing to go to places that other people do not. And we dance on the edge. And that's where we are the best. So, as increasingly countries become places where we have rights, where do we work where rights are not there? Who are the people within our cities and our streets who are not welcome, who are excluded, who don't feel that they belong? There's something about us being risk takers and being willing to do the things that people don't do. Liz talked about why not a lay moderator in MCC? Why not? So for me, that's our call. Our call is to be the dancing spirit of God, to be the people on the edge, the people who are always reaching out beyond the edge, to gather those in and make them home.
Thank you, Cecilia. Tony? Begin, my friend.
Light us.
You're good.
Good? Can
Yes,
you hear
sir.
me now? Okay.
Yes,
Okay. I was saying I love the short prayer, or you could just be a saying, come Holy Spirit, delight us. And I believe that there's so much that we have that we could delight the world with through the Holy Spirit. And in the book Canoeing the Mountains, which I would highly recommend to anyone, it's about Christian leadership in the 21st century, he talks about that where are we going to find the new growth, and where are we going to find vitality in our churches in the 21st century. He said, look to the margins. Look to the margins, and that's where you will find it. MCC began on the margins. That's where we started. I'm not sure we've stayed there. I think maybe we've moved to be a little more centrist. But if we know what it takes and what it's like to be on the margins, to be someone who has not been welcomed, who still stands under the foot of oppression. And so I believe that our answer to the world is that we can continue to lift up those who others say aren't worthy, the spiritual nomads of the 21st century, that we are a home for them. And so I think that we have an answer to the question of, is there a place for me? Particularly from the people from the margins. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. The next question is from Wanda, and Collins reads as follows. Please elaborate on how you see the business role of the moderator as different from the spiritual role in the daily work as the moderator. Please elaborate on how you see the business role of the moderator as different from the spiritual role in the daily work as the moderator. We'll start with Cecilia.
Hi. I've been reading Brené Brown's book, Daring to Lead, and she talks about values in there. And one of the questions she said that people ask her is like, do you mean my values in my work life or in my personal life? And I think that the question here is the same. It's the values that the moderator has in their spiritual life are the ones they should exemplify in the business role, in the CEO role, in guiding and supporting staff, and encouraging local leaders and local congregations. So I don't see them as being different because it's all part of the same person. It's all part of what it means to be the moderator. I think the challenge is balancing the tasks, and how do you hold people to account? How do you help people to grow in themselves? And that's no different if you're a boss, or if you're a pastor, or if you're someone who is companioning someone on their spiritual journey. So it's how we look at the tasks that are before us. I'm trying to think of an experience I had when I was elder, where there was a difference between those two roles, and I can't think of one offhand. If I think of one, then that's something to add into the question discernment that we talk about more in the town halls, or in the responses that we give to the questions that are posted. So thanks for the question. Great question.
Thank you, Cecilia. Tony?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Just making sure. Okay. I believe that what's vital for the moderator is to have competency in both areas. I do see them as being very much one and the same. I couldn't separate my faith from a decision that I'm making in business. I think that we have to have our faith and as the centerpiece of our conversations, regardless of what the topic is. I think to do so is it would be to somehow disvalue or put less of a value on our values. And I do think, again, that what's most important is that there's a competency in both areas, and that every decision that's made is a prayerful one. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Liz?
Thank you, Brendan. And Wanda and Carlos, thank you for the question. As I smiled when I saw it, because to Tony's point, is I believe they go together. You can't separate them. For me personally, my business decisions are very much informed by my personal life, my personal spiritual life, and my values as a spiritual person. I'm in the midst of a servant leadership certificate from Cornell right now. And so this was one of the reasons this kind of made me smile, was that it was actually something I had to reflect on just the other day. And I realized that in my experience, and as my spiritual life has grown, I approached my business life and actions from a different place, much more compassionate. That doesn't mean you don't make the hard decisions, but you do them with honesty and with integrity in a principled way. So I really feel that they go very much together. They are not mutually exclusive by any sense. So that's my answer. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. Next question comes from David. It reads as follows: some of our churches have felt as though they have been unheard in our leadership. How will you assure that every voice matters? Some of our churches have felt as though they have been unheard in our leadership. How will you assure that every voice matters? Tony?
Well, I think that we have so much work to do together and so much learning to do to be able to move into being a 21st century movement, and we can't do it without every voice being heard. Now, how would that happen? I would say that almost the majority of the work that needs to be done through the grassroots and supported by the leadership. And by that, I mean that you have to have processes that intentionally include all of the voices, and you do that, some of the ways that voices were heard for this particular process was through surveys. Surveys are one way that voices are heard, and it's an important one. I do think that there has to be other opportunities that we have to create, and that's part of what leadership does, is create these opportunities. We have that is in our purview to be able to do that. And so, like, when I think about those first 90 days and beginning to get organized around how are we going to approach our future, how are we going to get clear about our purpose and our identity, if those voices have to come from the grassroots, and the leadership's job is simply to facilitate that. Yes, we can have some input, but I think that, and if it goes back to the point I made earlier about, we also want to hear the voices from the margin. And so if we're not hearing those voices, then we're also missing out on great opportunities. So to sum it up, I would say that it's up to the leadership to work and provide those opportunities for every voice to be heard. And we're not going to be able to be an effective 21st century if we don't include all of the voices. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Liz?
Sure. Part of me wants to just say ditto to Tony. I'll go a little bit further. I think you've hit on some of the key points, but we need to ensure people are heard. And yes, surveys are one way to do it. I think we need to look. There's a lot of communication vehicles that we can take advantage of. I do believe that those in leadership need to hold what I might call roundtables. And I'm not talking about going out a bunch of places, because that's just not how life works today. But to be open to have, think about in your local church when you might have a new pastor coming in, and they set up those listening posts, where you can come and talk and nothing's off bounds. And I think it's that type of activity that needs to occur with great regularity, and to be able to listen to what others have to say. That's why when I mentioned, intentional advisory boards, that was what was guiding some of that for me, was for us to be able to hear one another and to be able to hear different points of view, because together we need to work that. We've tried a lot of things, and I'm sure we'll try a lot of things in the future, and some of them will work. Some of them will work better than others. Some of them will maybe only try once. But we've got to try it. And I would be very interested in ways that people in our churches think we should connect with them. It's not a tops down kind of environment. There's brilliant people in MCC. And I think if we went out and asked, we probably get, for every 10 people we ask, we probably get 9 different ways that we could connect that I've never thought of. And I think that's part of it. But it's great intentionality and then action on them. We have a council of elders, and I believe that they are point elders. We need to live into that, maybe in a new or different way than we are, or reduce it, something like that. So nothing's off the table. So in conclusion, I would say it is listening with intentionality, because we need to hear what people are saying. So, thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Cecilia.
you know, there's a role for our lay delegates here. I think there's a role for our network gatherings here. At the European Network Gathering, Reverend Dr. Mona West did a fantastic holy listening exercise, and it was very powerful because every single person in the room who wanted to say something could. There was a framework to make sure that people were able to express themselves, but in a way that was respectful of the body. There was a sense of lots of different opinions being held at the same time, and nobody arguing against one another or trying to say that someone was wrong. It was just an opportunity for people to speak. And for me, it felt like a very positive, very safe, and a very open way of carrying out dialogue. So there must be different ways of having conversations like that are either in face-to-face, like at network gatherings, or virtually through webinars like this. I think there's also something to be learned about things that have gone well. You know, taking on the statement of faith was a huge thing, and the teams that led that discussion brought us to a place where we were able to vote through something quite remarkable. So, you know, we are capable of doing this, and although there may be some people who really don't agree with the statement of faith, I think for many people they can see enough of themselves in it to say, yes, my voice is in there somewhere. So we can look at where we've done things well before and build on it, and use all the different practical and technological channels that we have to make sure that voices are heard. And, you know, just as simple as having a list and saying, okay, we haven't heard from this one church. Who's going to get in touch with them and make sure that they feel included and they can say something if they want to. So we can do this. I know we can do this.
Thank you, Cecilia. The next question comes from Reverend Joy. It reads as follows. Tell us about your faith and your calling. Tell us about your faith and your calling. We'll begin with Liz.
Wow, got a few hours? Because that is a very rich question. So I'll try to net it out a bit. For me, my faith is really what guides my life. It guides everything that I do. It informs everything I do. You know, I was one of those folks who ran away from church after having what I thought was a pretty rich spiritual life as a Catholic. But when they decided they didn't really want me, I ran away. And there was still that nagging call to come back. And it took a while. It took a while till I found MCC. But even during that time, my faith informed everything about what I do and how I do it. And from a calling perspective, for me, the ability to take these gifts that I have and the skills that I have through my experiences, not only in my local church and denominationally, but my experiences in my work life, to be able to bring them forward and offer them to others, to the body, to be building up our church so that we can reach those people in the margin, those people who don't have a voice, to be able to hold them near and dear, and to take what I've learned. And I've been given so much, I have to give back. I'm not happy if I'm not giving back. And for this time, this is how I feel called to be able to serve my God and the people of God. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Cecilia?
I have always felt called, and have always felt called to make a difference. For me, my basic calling is to build up people. I love doing that. I love mentoring people. I love seeing them grow. It's one of my great joys, and it doesn't matter whether I've done that within a church context or a secular context. That's what my call is, and yeah, it's what gives me the greatest joy. I am a rational contemplative, so I like to say I'm very noisy with people and very quiet with God. Spend a lot of time in silence. And I'm rational, you know, I think about my faith as well as feeling it. I would say that my faith challenges me and upholds me in equal measure. And, you know, I ponder greatly on the difficult things in this life, and have to sit with those from my own experience and watching the news, all of that. So I would say that I appreciate the mystery of the divine very much, and that fact that we do not know, and yet we are intimately known, and we get glimpses of God in our own faith journey and in the lives of others. And, you know, MCC made me. I came in as a woman in my early 20s, and I am the person I am today because of the opportunities and the companions and the wisdom that MCC has shown me. And, you know, I will always be very, very grateful for that. So, calling and faith, amazing things.
Thank you, Cecilia. Tony.
Well, I was actually one of those spiritual but not religious people, even before it became popular. This was over 30-some years ago, and I had this deep spiritual yearning for more God in my life. And so I decided to take that chance, that big risk, and go into the sanctuary at MCC Key West and see if there might be a place there for me. And I wasn't sure up until communion, and then when Reverend Steve Torrance said, you need not have it figured out, you need not have it all figured out, just come here seeking God as you understand God to be today. And I said, okay, that's it. And I'll tell you, from there, my faith just took off. It went into a new dimension, and it gave me a life beyond even my wildest dreams. When I wrote my first statement of call, which we used to have to write, I remember, and when I wrote my very first one, I had this phrase in there, to bring people closer to God and one another. And I felt like that was the calling on my life. And I have tried to live that calling in everything that I do and everywhere I go and every position I've held. It's a very relational calling, and part of that comes out of this strong sense I have that I can't imagine anyone's life not being better for knowing the inclusive gospel of Jesus Christ as we know it. I just can't imagine that their life couldn't be better for it. I'm not trying to convert everyone. That's not what I'm saying at all. All I'm saying is you experience the love of God, and you really experience it, I believe it will be life-changing. And so I'm still doing my best to try to bring people closer to God and one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Cecilia. And thank you, Liz. My friends, we are keeping watch on the time, and it's 1 minute before 8 o'clock Eastern Time, and so we want to be respectful of everybody's time who's on the webinar. And so what we want to let you know again is that for the questions that were not responded to on the webinar, we will ask the candidates to respond in writing, and they will be uploaded to the MNC website, so you can go there and to find those responses there. And then you'll also have time with them with the 1-hour webinars that are also scheduled. So don't think you're not going to get responses. We will make sure they respond to those questions that have come up since this last question was asked. Thank you so much for your input, and we look forward to continuing this journey with you. I'll turn it over to Gavin now.
Thank you, Brendan, and thank you everyone for being here. So following this, there will be a 1-hour town hall style webinar for each candidate. They'll be conducted in Spanish and English. And the webinars like this one will be recorded and made available on the MNC website. The dates and the times the webinars are on the screen now, and they'll also be sent out by email, and they're also available on the MNC website. So we look forward to seeing as many of you as possible there, where we can have a whole hour with each candidate to answer your questions. And we're also planning a final webinar with all 3 candidates in early June. So we'll let you know as soon as the date is finalized for that. So thank you very much, everyone. Please hang around after we've prayed, because there is a video that we want to share with you about the voting process at General Conference. And now ask Kelly to pray us out.
We thank you for allowing us to be here this evening. We thank you for allowing these candidates to step up to your calling. And we ask that we as a denomination, we as a body of Christians will care for them, hold them with loving arms the way you embrace us, and take care of each other through this process. We thank you for giving us the wisdom as a body to embrace this denomination, and we thank you for allowing this denomination to embrace us in return. We pray, Lord, that wisdom fall upon each and every one of us, that we might know your will in this decision. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the candidates. And Mike, over to you.
We are excited to announce we will once again be using electronic voting devices at the 2019 General Conference. This short video will refresh your memory or explain how the voting devices work. On Tuesday, the day of the business meeting, eligible clergy and lay delegates will look for signs directing them to different sign-in tables. Once signed in, you will be given a voting device. The device is the same size as a credit card, with 10 buttons that are used for voting. During the business meeting, a slide will be projected with numbered voting options. The slide will be projected first, but voting will not begin until the voting clerk announces that voting is now open. Once the clerk announces that voting is now open, you will press the numbered button to indicate your choice. The display screen on the voting device will briefly show your choice as it is being transmitted. If you press an ineligible button, an error will appear in the display screen. While voting is open, you can change your vote by simply pressing another choice. When the voting clerk announces that voting is now closed, no more votes will be transmitted. The results will immediately be known, and once verified, will be announced to the General Conference. If you have difficulty or questions during voting, there will be helpers walking the floor to assist. Following the business meeting, you will return your device as you leave the room. If you lose or do not return your device, you will be responsible for the replacement cost. If you have any other questions about General Conference or the voting devices, please email conferences@mccchurch.net. See you in Orlando at General Conference.
Thank you all for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you all on future webinars.